now we've done the overview, we're just going to get into a little bit of compression here in Logic on the drum session for Alan Stone's Naturally. I'm just going to use the Platinum Digital for individual compression here on the drums, and then I'll do some mix bus compression with the Vintage VCA. Okay, I'm just going to keep it that way. Feel free to experiment with different compressor engines based on the last video I did, but I'm just going to keep it with Logic's transparent one, just so hopefully you can start to hear compression and we can look at some of the basic features here. Now, before we start, there's a couple of things I like to do. One thing you definitely should do is the auto gain feature right here is turn this off. Okay, you want to make up your own mind when it comes to the output gain about how much audio volume signal you want to make everything back up by. Okay, because obviously our compressor is going to naturally bring volume levels down. Okay, it's going to bring volume levels down, so we need to make the track volume back up with some output gain. Okay, so I also like to switch to graph mode. We're going to see a histograph here of the audio, and we can start to see the compression taking place, which helps me visualize the compression a little bit better. But again, don't rely too much on seeing compression. It's got to really be about hearing the compression. Okay, the VU meter is quite useful. You can see it in dB reduction here. But if you're a beginner or you just want to check and see how things are going, if it's reacting well enough, then switch over to the histograph, the graph mode here, and you can start to see some compression. So auto gain off, and just as I went over before, threshold, any audio that makes it past the threshold will be compressed. The ratio will determine by how much. So a higher ratio, you can see here on this graph, it really flattening down. So a higher ratio is really going to squash down any audio that surpasses the threshold. The attack and release will of course be like, okay, so the quicker my attack is, it's really going to grab those transients quicker, and with a longer release time, it's going to stay compressed for longer. Okay, with a shorter release time, it's going to bring it back up to the volume it once was before. Okay, so you're going to get more like a pumping sort of sound if you have quick attack and release. Softer attack is going to be a lot smoother with a longer release, compressing it for longer, which is going to be quite nice. All sorts of things that you guys can experiment with. Okay, let's start with that kick drum here. I'm just going to be a bit aggressive with it as well, so you can start to hear some of this compression going on. All right, let's find a nice little section to loop where there's lots of kicks happening. Okay, there we go, just this little section here. Let's be a bit more aggressive with this noise gate. There you go, so you can see on my histograph now, you can see where the white lines are coming down, that's the compression pushing those peaks down. If I push the threshold back up, it's going to be louder overall because I'm letting those loud peaks through, but with the lower threshold, it's going to be squashing them down, and with a higher ratio, really going to be squashing them. Okay, here we go, let's open everything up, and we'll start to hear this compression. Here comes the threshold. With a ratio of 1 to 1, going to be no compression at all, right? So now we need to start squashing anything that falls below the threshold. Okay, much tighter, much more even. But of course we've lost a little bit of volume, so we can start to push this back up with the output gain. I have a longer attack. It's going to take a slightly longer amount of time to compress it, okay? And we almost get like this swell in, right? I guess it's almost like a crescendo, I suppose, just before it gets that attack, okay? Where a quicker attack is going to be so much tighter and punchier. A longer release is going to stay compressed for longer. Again, maybe something is more one-dimensional as a kick drum. We're not going to hear a whole lot of difference. Wait till we get to the vocals. You'll be able to hear like the envelope here acting a bit more obvious. Okay, nice. Cheeky thing you can do in Logic Pro. If you really like the sort of settings you've got on that compressor, you can hold the Alt key, click and drag it across, and it will duplicate it to the next track. Okay, let's hear these two kick drums together. So kick in and kick out. Maybe we'll have a slightly longer attack on the resonant kick head. just to see if I can give it a bit more character and tone to set it apart from my innie kick. Great, really thumping. Let's have a go at our snare drum here as well. Let's open up a compressor. And I'm going to stick on the VCA, auto gain off, and a graph mode so I can see things happening, okay? Let's keep the ratio off. So the idea of compression, why do we do it particularly with drums? To get a nice, even dynamic response out of everything, right? Because there may be the odd snare strike, as you can see here, that's a lot louder than the others. We want to keep some dynamic feel in there, some dynamic range, okay? We don't want it to sound completely robotic and sequenced. But just some overall dynamic control is a good thing. Otherwise, your listeners are going to be turning up and down their stereos all day long, trying to chase the volume that you've been mixing. Let's pop this guy up. Good. Cool, and again, I'm just going to copy that setting across. So here I kick and snare drum, and let's just ease in our overhead from earlier as well. Let's bring it back a little bit. It's coming out a little hot, isn't it? So we can control that in a minute. Try this without the compression. Yeah, just much more strong, even sort of sound, okay? Let's head to our tom drum. Just compress these guys now. Let's find a tom drum to play with. This guy right here. Okay, a little weak, kind of tubby sounding at the moment. Let's see if we can just give it some character with our compressor, okay? Because, on something like this where it's got a nice sort of like long sustain on it here, let's move that fade over. And you can see the initial strike of the tom drum and then the transients fade away quite quickly. Let's see if we can just like tighten this whole thing up, okay, make it much more even overall. Let's try a longer release so it's compressed for a little longer with a quicker attack to really grab the punch of that tom. Okay, without, with, yeah, a lot more urgency on that tom. Let's pull the same sort of thing over to our floor tom. Let's hear how these guys go together. Again, it's a shame on a track like this where we don't have a around the kit fill. Let's have a little bit more sustain on this guy. Great, okay. Now, I wouldn't bother ever doing any compression on the overheads, just because I like that sort of ambience. I like them staying as they are. I want a lot of like dynamic result from the overhead. I don't want to squash that too much. But conversely, if you've got a room mic up, it's quite nice to do some very quite hard compression on a room microphone, or if you leave the talkback microphone recording, you can crush that with like super high ratio, low threshold, really squash it, and then blend that in maybe with some saturation into the mix to help your drum sound really kind of pop a little bit. Particularly if you scoop away the mid-range and just have like the top end and the bottom end in there. Similar to like New York compression, which is kind of what we call parallel compression, where you send the drums away to a mix bus, and then you blend in a whole compressed sound of the drums against what you've mixed on the other end of your project. But you've got really heavy compression on there, you've taken away the mid-range, left the top and the bottom on there, and it can really add some punch and crispness to your drums. I'll do a parallel compression session just after this one. Or, as I said, you can take the drum room mic, which I was saving, and we can squash this. Let's try this with our FET compressor, which is quite a heavy compressor. You can see here with the longer release time that it's keeping it squashed for longer, right? And then that's what I said, you can turn it into a musical sort of plugin where you can play with the attack and release times to time it to the track if you've got something else that you're compressing. So your really long release time, you know, it's gonna, if it's a constant room mic like this, it's not gonna make its way back up. I'm going to yield a little bit on the release just so it's got a bit of movement to it, okay? So let's listen to our drums at the moment, compressed and EQ'd, and then I'm going to blend in this drum room mic that's had some really crushing compression on there, okay? Let's have a listen here. Take away some of the mid-range on this one. All right, let's blend this guy back in. Yeah, I can just add a little bit of excitement. Great, there's our compression, gating, and EQ. It's a really nice drum sound. There might be some balancing we do with the levels of the kick drums and the snare drums. Great, let's turn everything off. Well, let's keep it on, let's have a little listen. Great, there's our journey so far. Again, you've got a copy of the mix so you can listen to this. There it is, there's just some basic compression on the drums. Yeah, great. Next time we'll move on to a little bit of effects processing. Great.